Thank you for making the time to join us today on OCD. It's a pleasure to have all of you with us. Um, Thank you for also joining today with us, the panel. It's very kind of you to make time. It's a pleasure to have you on board. Hope everyone is safe and your loved ones and you are following the prescribed safety guidelines put out by our governments. This series of webinars has been titled Turning Over a New Leaf, something we believe is apt not just to everyday lives of consumers across the globe, but also to each and every business that caters to them as an audience. Over the last session, we had an interesting conversation around food-based and the essential retail categories. Today, we dive into the education category. Since the evolution of mankind, education has been the cornerstone of civilization and society. The most respected lot of people in every society across the globe have almost always been academicians. But the truth is, over the generations and centuries, this category has moved and progressed at a very slow pace. However, the last decade has seen the most rapid changes in the industry. Technology, competition, and the millennial and Gen Z generations have pushed the industry out of its comfort zone into a whole new orbit. Well, that is only one side of the story. What has transpired over the last 50 days have been a never before seen series of developments in this category that have had both business owners, parents, and students glued in anxious anticipation of what should be and will be the next steps. This afternoon, we bring you a panel comprising of an eclectic bunch of business leaders that are operating in the education category as institutions, technology-based solutions, and service providers. This panel will shed some light, much needed, on how things are likely to play out in both the near and distant future. These individuals are adapting quickly to the changing environment with a very, very firm eye on their consumers' needs, while they continue to address all of their fears. They are, after all, in a very noble business and are getting things done with a great level of dignity despite all the turmoil and chaos around them. It is an absolute honor to introduce the distinguished members of the panel today. I request the panelists to wave out to the audience as I call out your names. Mr. Puneet Kottappa, Executive Director of the Narayana Group, and Ms. Sri Lakshmi Reddy, Founder of Keystone International School. Representing the institution side of the panel, Puneet and Sri Lakshmi, welcome on board. Pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Uday Reddy, CEO and founder of Yup TV Inc. and also Yup Master, and Ms. Charu Noheria, Chief Business Officer at Practically, represent the technology-enabled content platforms that are turning out to be a great source of relief and strength, both to parents and institutions during these challenging times. Mr. Uday and Charu, thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to some great insights from your side today.
Thanks.
Also joining us, great to have you on board. Also joining us today are Priya Prakash, founder and CEO of HealthSetGo, and Mr. Suraj Peri, co-founder Gradwine, representing the service provider side of the panel that have occupied niche positions in the industry and are rallying through the uncertain times while they figure out how to pivot their business models. Do tell us about how things are shaping up for you and how you believe you can continue to support the parent and student communities and the institutions that you all serve. We are ready to roll then with webinar 2 of turning over a new leaf. Our first question is to Sri Lakshmi, Priya, and Puneet in that order. First and foremost, what are those health and safety norms which educational institutions earlier would have been reluctant to implement and may have seen as a leap of faith and now will become an essential part of the way schools operate? Sri Lakshmi, we'll start with you.
Hi, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us in this session. As you know, as I was thinking about this, what struck me is the word reluctance. I think if any educator is reluctant about health or safety or any measure, we wouldn't have been educators. Rather, I would say what measures we were earlier to what are the new measures that we are going to take now, right? And whenever it comes to dealing with children, especially up to grade 12, right from kindergarten, first thing that comes to any educator's mind is health and safety. And as I was going through, the UNICEF's safety measures, earlier version versus now, there are 4 components. One is, when you're sick, you don't come to school. You make sure that you are safe and you keep your surroundings safe, and making sure that you wash your hands, keeping the area clean, the environment clean, the surfaces clean, and decontamination, environmental cleanliness, And the fourth point was about social distancing. Among all these 3 points, if you observe, the first 3 points have always been measures for safety across the schools over ages. Right? Irrespective of how well they have been followed, they've always been as part of safety measures. Now, the new aspect that has come in as a safety measure is social distancing. I'm sure everybody in the panel would, agree with me that social schools are quite opposite to social distancing. We send our children to school to interact socially, to be with each other, to have emotional connection, to hug your teacher, to hold your friends, and to run in the garden, to, play sport with your friends. So what really matters is how do we bring in this new safety measure, the social distancing, and how do we analyze it, and how do we ensure that we are actually continuing to maintain the well-being and aspect of our children while we address this safety measure. So go back to what Gautam has asked, the reluctance versus acceptance, right? Now, I think nobody would, dare to say, I do not want to do this, we do not believe in this. Rather, anything and everything that is possible to keep our children safe and to keep our parents safe, every single educator would be ready to do that. It's about how we do it. It's about the process in which we do it, and making sure that in this whole process we keep our children at the center than putting in across our personal opinions. So the change is about social distancing. The change is about limiting larger groups. And can we actually make our children sit 6 feet distance? Even if we make them sit, do we think that our children are ready to sit at a distance from their peers? So these are the questions that we have to analyze further and think further.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. Children will be children is what we are taking away from what you said. Priya, what is your take on this? You come in from a whole different angle.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gautam. So, for the last 5 years, I've been running an organization which has a niche in health for schools. And the reason it's a niche is because this kind of thought about the fact that schools need to have health programs, children in schools need to be taught health apart from physics, chemistry, math. I think that has been a very niche thing right now, and not too many schools have really been thinking about it. And suddenly, because of this COVID situation, we've had health becoming not a nice to have, or I'll do it next week, or I'll think about it next year on January 1st. It's become something that we all have to think about right now. Whether it's children, we need to do it now. And there's been a new sense of urgency that has come in health overall. Now, when it comes to schools, I think for many years, the schools that we have worked with, we've been doing programs around hygiene and sanitation, around good health, nutrition, physical activity. So health, although for COVID, we see health in a narrow light of hand washing, and we see health in a hygiene and sanitation light, but all of us agree on the fact that health is a more holistic concept. People are very worried about their immunity, especially the immunity of their children, their family members. People are more worried about people above the age of 65 as well as below the age of 15. I think both of the cases where people are extremely worried about their health. So having schools take a holistic approach to talking about health on a proactive level now on a daily basis is going to be the need of the hour. We have been teaching a health education curriculum now in over 300 schools across the country, but there are 2 lakh schools across the country. And during COVID, we have made sure that all our resources are publicly available so schools can access them and start to have these conversations. Because the moment schools reopen, I think education on health is going to be the number one thing. And secondly, I was just looking at the news today, and we are closely working on a global level with such as the World Economic Forum. And UK has just decided to open its schools 1st of June. And the kind of guidelines that UK is giving are very similar to what Sri Lakshmi was mentioning earlier, that there has to be social distancing. But more than that, schools now would have to budget for hand sanitizers in every classroom. Every teacher will be required to wear a mask. There are blue-collar workers. There are a lot of, in pre-primary schools, there are a lot of DDs and the people who help the young kids. They will all have to wear masks and gloves. There has to be a proper protocol in every school that if any case of COVID is detected, what does the school need to do? And even beyond that, the temperature checks need to be done on a daily basis. So there is a huge checklist. We've been at the forefront of trying to compile that checklist to guide schools. But I think hopefully this webinar is going to prove to be a great input source for all the schools and all the people who are watching so that these best practices can be percolated. But yes, this is a new reality and we need to be prepared.
Thank you, Priya. Very interesting perspectives there. I'll move on to Puneet. Puneet, you are driving a behemoth, and it's very, very difficult to steer ships like yours, which have a lot of inertia and momentum. How will you respond to this situation? It will be interesting to hear from you.
I think Gautam absolutely right. It's a very, very large organization for us. 4 lakh plus students and about 40,000 employees, right? So it's a pretty large organization, and we have a lot to do on thinking on the health. I think one of the first questions that we have to ask ourselves is, yes, schools will reopen one day. It may not be as soon as June 1st, definitely not as soon as June 1st. Nobody's going to be ready by then. But when schools do reopen, what is the form and structure of schools reopening? And fundamentally, I think Sri Lakshmi and Priya covered a lot of what I wanted to discuss. But what I can bring you perspective is that health and education now have to start going together. And Priya is very right. She's a vendor in some of our schools in Gurgaon. But very right that, for a school owner like us, priority of some of these things that we've been talking about till now is not very high. For us, academic outcomes are very high. How is the student learning? That's very high. Now, health, safety and security, environment of the classroom start becoming very, very high. So before we open schools, we have a lot to do on protocolization, and we have to learn from somewhere. And I can disclaimer here is we don't have all the answers. Nobody here can claim to have all the answers. We can only say learn from the institutions across the world. I didn't know that London had released this order. I'll certainly go through it, but I have some information from China that I can give everybody in this conference. China, very fortunately, have started opening their schools towards the last 10-15 days. In some places where the cases have been low. Fortunately for everyone, the protocols have not been very, very stringent. Okay, not very stringent, as in there have to be temperature checks every day. Yes, they have to be masks that everyone has to wear. Yes. But student to a classroom ratio has not changed. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, residential schools also have come back in China, in the institutions that I have asked in China at least. And the residential dorm to student ratio also has not changed. And the other information to everyone is 90 to 95% has been the attendance of when schools have reopened. So this is very, very good news for all of us in this conference. 95%, primarily some of that could be because what they've opened is only the 10th and the 9th and the 11th standard, which are because they write their board exam. 9th and the 12th, I think they have an important exam at that time. So those are the only classes that have opened up to now. Yes, the attendance may be lower when you go lower classes, but certainly without safety norms, health norms, there is no question of us opening schools. And I can only tell you practically on the ground, we are very, very far away from implementing all these, very, very far away. So there is no question. We need at least a 40 to 45 days. I think 4 to 6 weeks, at least a timeline for schools to gear up, for procurement to gear up, for supply chain to gear up. And because you asked me on the size and scale, Gautam, I think for us at least it'll take at least a month or 45 days to gear up all our schools based the
right. So Puneet, you continue to keep a very close eye on the developments in other countries that are a few weeks ahead of us, and that's how you're trying to cope up with this and sort of gain from their learnings. Thank you, Puneet. Thanks a lot. I will move on to the next question to Suraj. At Gradvine, you represent a business which counsels students that aspire to be in the top 50 universities in the world, with up to 52% of your subscribers ending up in the top 10 universities in the world in their chosen streams. Our question to you today, which I'm sure all the panelists as well as the guests would be very keen to know more about, is what impact will this pandemic have on the flow of students to these overseas universities? Do you anticipate rise in enrollments to Indian universities, with parents becoming reluctant to send their kids abroad? And how is your business model going to change based on the learnings from the current situation? Also, to the audience, while Suraj responds to this question, we will be going into poll 1, which will just pop up on our screen. Please do engage with the poll to help us learn more about your perspective about a very hot issue at the moment. Suraj, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me in the first place. So one of the things that one of the things that GradVine's been pretty good at doing is exploring interests in terms of what the students are trying to get to and making sure that we are connecting them with mentors or students on the ground in these universities, wherever they are. We have a mentor network of upwards of 700 mentors at every single top 30, top 20 sort of the university doing anything and everything that you can possibly imagine. And one of the things that we are seeing from both the numbers of students that are coming to us in terms of asking us for our sort of services, as well as students that are trying to make a decision in terms of whether this is the right time for them to go or not. I think there are two clear tracks that have emerged. One is the undergraduate track, where students who are in high schools are trying to go for their undergraduate degrees abroad. And the other one is the graduate track, where students in their undergrads are trying to go for their masters or PhDs abroad. So I'm going to take a minute for each one of these tracks. Students that are in their 11th grades already, it's going to be very difficult to move away from all of the prep that they've been doing for standardized tests or advanced placement tests or ACTs or SATs and stuff like that, and move to a very Indianized sort of a version where they take in IIT JEE or that sort of a coaching or that sort of prep. So students and parents both are taking a step back, sort of reevaluating all of the situations and circumstances that are going on. But I don't see that there is going to be a major change in terms of the viewpoints of people that are trying to go for undergraduate studies abroad. Because essentially the options at this point are a little limited. One thing that Indian undergraduate universities can themselves do is increase the number or the options in which students can then shift over to undergraduate education. And that is something that is going to be critical. We haven't seen universities like Ashoka or Flame or any of these new age universities come out and say that they're going to be changing their admissions requirements yet. But we assume that is going to happen. So to answer the first part of your question, there has not been a significant change in terms of the mentality of either the students or the parents when it comes to going undergraduate admissions abroad. Masters and graduate admissions is a different thing altogether. The guys that are getting out of their undergrads can go have the leeway of entering the job market, can tide it out, can wait out the tide, look at situations, and then apply a year or two later. So definitely there will be some sort of a decrease in the number of students applying abroad for their graduate education, but we do not see that big an effect in terms of the undergraduate abroad.
Very nice. Interesting question coming through, Suraj, from the audience. Do you see the premium pricing commanded by top colleges wither away due to a shift to online teaching, which takes away from the crucial campus experience factor? This is from Saket Sisla, one of our guests today.
Okay, absolutely. So, great question, right? But this goes back one step. You have to figure out how universities themselves universities abroad that is, are adapting to the situation. The fall semester, which is the major intake, which is starting August, September, a lot of universities, including Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, etc., have come out and said that they might be looking at a hybrid model of teaching, where they will accommodate few students that are not able to learn as effectively at home in their residence halls. But majority of the teaching that these professors have in class will be recorded and put up online for the benefit of students that are okay learning from their houses, from the comfort of their home without getting out. The issue with pricing has been something that's been raised by multiple sort of people across all spectrums. I think universities, especially the big ones, the Ivies, universities that have big endowments, etc., will essentially figure out sort of a hybrid model for financing education for students, wherein they either say that students take less credits in that one semester that is online, or they move to partial scholarships, funding, or other sorts of financial instruments that can lessen the financial burden on students. But the smaller, more specialized liberal arts or STEM schools with about 1,000 kids or 1,200, 1,500 kids, those are not going to be able to dole out such a hefty financial package or reduce their costs enough to make it lucrative enough for a lot of students, especially the international students as such.
Thank you.
It's going to be very difficult for students to pay upwards of ₹1 crore for a Stanford GSB or a MIT Sloan or a Carnegie Mellon while they're not on campus and essentially learning just from looking at videos discussion forums will need to be made better, and a lot of technological intervention needs to come in before universities can keep the prices at the same level as they have at this point in time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suraj. Thanks for engaging with that audience question. The polls are out. The question on the poll was, what percentage of the emphasis should lie on the infrastructure provided and equipment provided by the institutions versus the percentage of emphasis that should lie on personal hygiene of the student? It's an even balance. Clearly, nobody seems to know at this point in time, which is good news and also extremely bad news. So we don't have a verdict there, but it was an interesting thing to discuss. Any sort of comments on this from the panelists?
Yes, I would like to say one thing on this. That
we'll go one by one. Sorry, Priya, you can go first.
Thanks, Gautam. So I was just trying to say that, we were just doing a huge webinar with kids and parents, and we were talking about hand washing. And something as simple as that, which is so important right now, we realized nobody knows how to wash their hands properly. And I think this is we've never been taught. I've never been taught in my school how to wash my hands properly. We all simply go to the app and just do this and come down. And a lot of people are saying, okay, sing happy birthday twice. And, personal hygiene is become such a, weird thing right now. But that is something that people need to be taught, the basics of personal hygiene. So I think, yes, we can ask people to be hygienic. But I think since we are talking about schools and colleges and institutions, it needs to go the other way as well, that it needs to be taught as well, because a lot of us don't know.
Thank you, Priya. Very interesting. Somebody else was having a go at this question. I'm sorry.
No, Gautam, I just a passing comment that the poll and what Priya said proves that it's 50-50. Both have to. Yeah. That's exactly what the conclusion that is.
So
like I said, no. Yeah, Sri Lakshmi.
The poll also clearly shows that everybody has a role to play in it, and not looking at health and hygiene just from a COVID perspective, right? And we have to think everything, long term. It's not about keeping
absolutely
and children safe now. Every single time going forward.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. Thank you so much. What changes do you anticipate in the way schools will be run from here on? Schools or other institutions? And what will the definition of the classroom permanently change? I think this is something that work from home has sort of completely spun the business and across all industries around. What's going to happen to the education industry? So we will start with Charu and then we will move to Uday, Sri Lakshmi and Puneet in that order. Thank you.
So thanks, Gautam, for having me. So I think the definition of classroom itself, it is a learning space, right? It's a learning space uninterrupted by outside distractions. So by definition, classroom doesn't mean four walls, put 50 people inside, put one teacher. That's not a definition of classroom. Classroom is a space, right? And I think this just pushes us to reimagine that definition of a classroom in a completely new way, right? So it kind of throws us to think out of the box and how we can reimagine this whole classroom space. And I think online tech quite helps you to reimagine the definition of classrooms and what learning can be anytime, anywhere. It can deliver, could be delivered to your doorstep. Just like nobody thought food could be delivered to your doorstep just in a simple click of a button, right? So there are a lot of, I think, we have a long journey, I would say, ahead of us where we can reimagine, and every educator around the world, every institution head around the world is going to reimagine how classrooms look differently from, based on where they are equipped today versus where they are headed. But I think we have to think away from an older mindset thinking where we're already thinking now, we're having these conversations, which is great. Because gone are the days where you take a student from point A in learning to point B, shove them, in a bus and take them everywhere, right? Because I think most of the traditional methods are made for an average student. And, I would like to add that for an average teacher as well, right? So how do we push the teaching and learning to kind of cater to, all students within the classroom? How do we make it more personalized? And don't forget, we're in an era of instant gratification. We're in the era of TikTok, WhatsApp, where you put a post out there, you get 1,000 likes. So student attention time frame, as you know, and the need for instant feedback has grown over time. So I think that is what new classrooms would look like. I wouldn't say that, to our earlier side conversation that schools are going away, or, there is nobody is trying to, do that. But just to say we have to reimagine how a modern classroom looks like for the next 20, 30, 40 years, right? And that thinking has to start, and it's already started. So that's the good news. And practically here is to support actually that drive that thinking and help schools and help institutions and students and parents, because as we know all of us have a part to play. And we have recently launched a product called School from Home kind of a kit, right, where work from home is a term that everybody use. How do you make this school from home much more effective? And a lot of packaged content we do from a learning hygiene perspective. We've taken care of a lot of virtual classrooms, content, delivery of, e-learning books, stuff like that. But I think the crux is still how we drive that innate desire for learning, right? How do you make it more exploratory rather than putting it down the throat, right? So that's the kind of thinking has to evolve. I'm sure.
Thank you, Charu. I was expecting a slightly stronger answer towards completely digital classrooms and.
Good, I work with these guys.
Yeah, but I am guessing you work with some of the people on the panel, so it was very diplomatically and well put. Thank you. I will move on to Mr. Uday. You've seen.
Yeah.
Sorry, Charu, you were saying?
I'm saying I'm trying to balance it out here.
Thank you. Your objective is served. Mr. Uday, your take on this?
Hi Gautam, thanks for having me.
Hi.
So
wonderful to have you, sir.
We are new entrants into this space, so we are more in the online internet streaming. But my view, with a very little few months of experience, is that there will be a hybrid model in schools, both traditional and online. I think a lot of schools would give flexibility to students to come in person or online. There will be a lot of innovation would happen in the technology space, where students who are online will also have equal or better experience of being in the school. So in the past, even my kids go to school, a public school in the US. Pre-COVID, there was no online education. It has always been offline. So the technology today in the education space is more catered to online tutorship, like one-on-one kind of a technology. So there will be a lot of innovation in the space, which will happen so that the online students will get same or better experience than offline, and the flexibility will still remain with the students. If you go back to Spanish flu in 1918, there are after the first wave, there is 2 waves came in a span of 1.5 years. So there will be always, until the vaccine is found, there will always be in the mind of a parents or teachers, all school institutions, that they would love to give the flexibility with the students, and also ensure the students get the same or better experience as if they're in the offline. So that's what I feel that my view of it.
Thank you, Mr. Uday. Thank you so much. Moving on to Sri Lakshmi.
So,
how are you going to cope with this?
Yeah, Gautam, I think the question today, the future of a classroom, I would like to address it at 2 levels. One, in India, there are different category of institutions, right? We cannot definitely put all the school system, the private schools, government schools, affordable schools, international schools into one category. And the second thing is about having that, as a freedom or a choice versus a mandate. I'd like to address the second one first. I think until now, for classrooms, the safety, the quality of teaching, or as we were discussing about health norms, were always a choice, right? And I think at least because of COVID, I see there is an opportunity for schools to look at it as mandate, health being a mandate, technology being a mandate, and where you don't have, school leaders going around and having to convince a parent, having to convince a teacher that technology is, great in classroom, that blended learning is good for classrooms. So So on the positive side, yes, COVID-19 did, bring out a very quick change where you're not wasting your time in convincing someone and just quickly adapt to it. As I said earlier, like children adapt very easily. I think we need not be, not worry about children here. It's more about the adults, right? How parents are adapting to this and how teachers are adapting to this. And coming back to the first point and what this means, what this classroom, future classroom means to different category of schools. On one hand, I definitely see parents who are sending the children to schools for midday meal. Right? I don't think that parent is really thinking about whether the school is clean, whether they've taken all the measures, whether teacher is teaching online, or whether they can send to the school. It's just that I send my child to the school, he'll get his midday meal. On the other hand, on the other extreme, you look at a parent who's thinking about how was the food prepared by the school? Is it sanitized? What quality of plate are you using? How many number of hours is the COVID-19 going to stay on that plate in case if something happens? Right. So I think for us as educators, as parents, and as adults, what we really need to look for is in each of these categories, how much can we really prioritize the safety? How much can we really, if there is a school where the health is already addressed, safety is already addressed, then look at the opportunity for integrating online option. And as Charwood very well said, I think nobody is here to just replace a teacher. And that's never going to happen, because end of the day, we are human beings. And as it's always been told that we are social beings, right? We need that human contact. We need that social interaction. It's about using technology to really enhance our learning, our children's learning, and to understand how much more can we do. And this generation children, irrespective of which economic category they come from, they're looking for quick information, quick learning. And the technology is, a very good source for that kind of, need. So addressing what category of schools we are working with and prioritizing, do we want to look at online teaching or do we want to look at health first in a particular school? So prioritizing, what is more important in a particular school, and then looking at, addressing everything else, makes more sense than doing one or doing online versus doing blended.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. You've been very vocal about the fact that children are coming back to schools, very encouraging. And you're looking at a very hybrid model, just like Mr. Uday had said, where one complements the other. Thank you so much for your thoughts on this. Puneet, yours is a model where the teacher is the brand. The lecturer is the master, and that's why people sort of students aspire to move from grade to grade, section to section, to be with the better lecturer. Will it ever change for Narayana, the perception of the classroom? What is likely to happen?
See, Gautam, this is a very, very frequent question that we get. How much of technology and how is technology going to change your organization? Now, I'll give you, maybe it's slightly lengthy, but it will be very useful to everybody on this panel and also in this conference. So there are 5 things or 4 things that we are running today, which is first live classes, which is the classroom, the teacher we're giving on a platform. Actually, the platform we're using today is Zoom. We're giving the teacher on a platform, and we're conducting 5,000 live classrooms a day. Right now, students are on holidays, but prior to this and post May 26th, there will be 5,000 live classrooms a day. Point number 1. Then we're doing assessments, and assessments is very important because in assessments we get to understand how much of the live classroom has been effective for the teacher. Right. The third one is we're giving all our material online, which is our books, curriculum, 3D. Supplementary material, 2D material, all of those things to go online, right? And the last thing that I can think of is whatever else is an engagement in the classroom, like meeting your friends or, asking doubts to a teacher, approaching the teacher. This is something that we should try to replicate online, but it's very, very challenging to replicate because that's a physical aspect that you can't. Now, what everybody in this conference has to ask themselves is how much of this is going to remain post schools reopen. Live classes, for example, I don't think will remain because you will go back to school and you'll want to listen to a physical teacher. Assessments, I think assessments will remain. Assessments can be made online. All our main exams, JEE mains, your advanced, your NEET, everything is going to go online in the future. Probably even 10th standard exam may go online in the future. And then you have to ask yourself the supplementary learning material. whether it's your 2D module, your whatever you see animated or teacher driven, all of those will remain, but they will not be core curriculum. They will be supplement. I missed the class. I can go home and listen. I couldn't attend something. I didn't understand what the teacher was teaching properly. So I will use this. So I think that approach for startups, for all the companies who want to be in this space, you have to try to understand how much of your product will be relevant post schools reopening, and that aspect of the product is what you should focus. The last thing I want to add is on costing. Right now, every school, you'd be very surprised that many schools don't pay well. I mean, I shouldn't say it, but many schools don't pay well. The reason being that they will think, boss, you're giving me, this much for this movie. What if I did it internally and I just asked my teacher only to continue this? Then I would not need to pay this money. That's how every school owner. And people like us, because we are a large institution, we can in fact invest in IT, we can invest in R&D ourselves. We will be even less because we will then put together how much am I paying outside and how much can I do it internally. So you have to make your product in such a way that what is going to be relevant to the classroom post COVID and how can it be cost effective. So that discussion should not be there with the school owners. No discussion. This product, 1 rupee, free, 50 rupees. Figure out a business model that works at that kind of pricing. That is when you can truly bring in a change in education. A lot of startups come and say 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees per head, 20,000 rupees per head. Byju's is not a story that everybody can do. And even Byju's, I don't know how much of a story it is. Future will tell us. But don't think that's how all startups are going. So I'm sorry for the honesty on this, but I want to bring to everybody in this what is truly and practically possible in the classroom.
That's why
I appreciate. Yeah, go ahead, please, Sharu.
Yeah. So that's why Puneet has pushed us to make our product free for schools, free for teachers. So as of today, practically is free for schools, free for teachers. No commercial impact on any school around the world, right? So free learning. And I think I wouldn't say that's a bad business model. Honestly, schools, and Puneet, to your point, budgets are shrinking not just in India, right? This is a reality all over the world. We keep saying that budgets are only less in India. In fact, India pays for education much more than anywhere else around the world. Right? And even in the US and the UK, I've seen $5 to $7 USD is the max that a school pays for an app, right? And if you look at it, we pay much more than in some cases. So we are okay to shift the cost to the parent as long as the engagement is there and we can bridge school and after school learning. I think the major problem in the breakdown of continuum in learning is happening right there, that we have so much of content being pushed through the schools and teachers engaging in the classroom, students going back home consuming these 50 different apps, and teacher welcoming a absolutely confused classroom in the next day, right? So that breakdown is happening, and that's where, again, practically comes in to bridge that gap, right? So we want to serve the education space not just via the student directly from the parent, or parent says, oh, mera beta engineer banega, so I need this product, right? But the point is that the engagement has to be driven down the schools. There is no two thoughts about it. It has to be through the teacher. So.
No, I'm glad, Charu. I think that was foundationally where I'm coming from, because people think that there's some lot of money here and lot of this thing here. It's not that. It's very, very difficult because there is a parent and a teacher and a student are accountable to. They will ask, I am paying you even 20 rupees or 50 rupees or 100 rupees. What is the value that I'm getting out of this?
Yeah, but I think I really commend you, Sri Lakshmi, and a lot of other schools who kind of really, I have never seen schools move at this rapid pace. This is amazing, right? We've seen you guys just being so nimble about things, teachers learning themselves. Where do we think about teachers having, like in medical, we have continued medical education, right? In teaching, never we have ever thought about continued teaching, learning or whatever, right? Teachers learning. So teachers have themselves started to learn new things, new technology. They are not scared anymore. They know this is a way of life going forward. They have to embark. So I think this is a step function in life of anyone associated with education and tech, I would say.
Just
I would add that I think mental health is something that we haven't exactly spoken about, but thanks to the online engagement that a lot of students are having and a lot of online classes, the kind of feedback that we get as a health organization is that children are stressed and parents are stressed. I guess it's not easy staying at home the whole day with your kids. So parents are definitely feeling it. Children are also feeling it. They cannot go outside and play. One of the things that I never thought was possible with technology was actually getting children active or ensuring that their mental health was better. But thanks to technology, we've been able to do that. So for example, we have every Wednesday, we have Workout Wednesday, which is a physical activity free session. Again, it's all free. We have also switched to a very free model. But so there's an active Wednesday where a coach comes in. We have one of the best trainers in India coming in for kids. And you have thousands of kids at home when they don't even have space. They can't go to a park, obviously, but in their bedroom, they put out a mat and they are exercising for 1 hour. We are now trying to make it 2 hours a week at least, because at the end of the day, again, coming back to the health point, thanks to COVID, health and wellness is very important. Mental health is very important. So if there's any extracurricular that, I would also tell the companies and service providers here who are offering online education, that if you can incorporate health and wellness within that online education, or if Puneet with Narayana, if you can, look at having a class in the timetable focused on activity or health and wellness, I think that is something quite required, because people are extremely stressed at this point. That's what we have understood.
Yeah. So Puneet, Uday here. So one.
Sorry.
Yeah. Puneet, Uday here. We would like to make one point is democratization, right? We talk about all educational institutions come and talk about democratization. The per capita income of this country is 80,000. Okay. So this democratization means the education has to be affordable across the country. And what this COVID situation has brought in is the technology which will enable live learning, interactivity, in addition to testing, hyper-personalized testing. All of these capabilities can be made, complement students from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 government schools. I have a top faculty from Hyderabad going live with ability to ask, to answer all the doubts of the students, able to take tests. These are the facilities at a very affordable cost can be given across the country to every nook and corner of the country. That I think is going to be a huge outcome of this COVID.
I want to just respond to you here. You're absolutely right. So there's another side to democratization. You're right. You're a top teacher with us also. We have top teachers. We can give them to everywhere. But the problem is connectivity is not that good. They find a challenge today. In fact, in some of our smaller centers, Akibedu, Bobbili, Narsapuram, some of these places where we have schools, we're not able to run live classes properly because it's costing 700 MB of data for 1 hour of class. 1 hour of class costs 700 MB of data. Okay, we can expect city people to go on recharging their phone. Many of them have 1 GB free per day maximum. And plus, it's not very good. So then the disengagement is starting, and parents are seeing 2 children. That's 1.4 GB of data per hour of class. How am I going to be watching 2 to 3, even 2 3 hours? We're only giving 2 to 3 hours of class. Only 2 to 3 hours of class. How am I going to be able to watch this? So there's a lot between the theory of, we can democratize it, but a lot to do with what's actually happening on the ground. Connectivity is not so good and people don't have that inclination yet.
Puneet, the Zoom
honestly,
is not...
one of the recent survey which has been done with 1,800 schools, equally, government schools participation, private schools participation has been there in this survey. This shows that 60% of the private institutions have responded that they have a financial issue. And only 12% of the government, institutions have said that they have financial issues. That shows that, for many government institutions, many private institutions, 50% is a huge number, right? Every single decision that is going to be taken towards health, when we say sanitization, think about a small thing. When you have 2,000, 3,000 kids coming into the school every day, how much sanitizer you're going to use, and the school, how much ever the school leader wants to invest in the safety and health issue for a child, it's about cost end of the day, right? Is government going to help? Is the organizations? So it's a debate then. How much do I invest in health? How much do I invest in online learning? How much can I support my parent? How much can a parent support the school? So things are running at multiple levels, right? So I think what is required is first, the student is coming from a home and thinking from a parent perspective, and how much can they afford, how much can school afford, and what is the most important thing that we need to do at this time. Do I invest in online learning? Do I invest in health? So I think that analysis and helping schools and education leaders to analyze and prioritize it, and then help them invest in the right thing is most important.
So I would say it's not an option at this point in that sense to invest in education or health. I think it's something that, as per the global trends, also the fact that COVID is one of the most contagious diseases we've seen in a long time coming from a health perspective. I think it's not about, I would say, priority, but health is something that will have to be invested in. The more educated the parents are and the students are before coming to the school. In fact, I would say if hygiene seminars can be organized by the school before parents come, some kind of online training for the parents that once you come to school, this is the kind of practices that children need to follow. Of course, that personal hygiene accountability has to be there, but some investment will have to be made, whether it's in sanitizers or a soap, or, I mean, these, if you look at it in the overall context of the fact that in case one school does get a COVID positive case, what would be the impact? I think the cost benefit analysis speaks for itself. In case a school does get a COVID positive case, that school will mandatorily have to shut down for a period of time. The education of those children will be affected yet again. They'll have to go and be in quarantine for a certain amount of days. So I would say that at least that investment is definitely mandatory for this initial phase until we have a decrease in the number of COVID cases overall.
Thank you everyone for holding the conversation together. I had a small technical glitch, but yeah, I'm just pulling up poll 3. We'll move on to the next segment in the meantime. Pulling up poll 3 because poll 3 is more relevant to the conversation that's happening right now. And my next question will be to Uday, Suraj, Priya, and Sri Lakshmi in that order. So we have a massive sort of inventory of insights which are coming through because of technology. So most of the technopreneurs in the education space, what are your learnings and takeaways from the amount of information that you sort of have access to today by virtue of working with educational institutions across categories, K-12 to grad schools? What is the kind of learnings you have and takeaways you have? It'll be interesting to hear your take on this, and the audience can poll on poll 3, which will be up in a few seconds. We'll start with Mr. Uday.
Yeah. So what we have very 2 months of insights with the online classes. What we have is primarily we have moved from one-to-one tutoring to a very broadcast architecture. So there's a lot of learnings. How do we deliver quality education across many number of people? As Puneet, you said that we have a lot of learnings of how to deliver a stream in a rural areas also, and in terms of how can we make an online education very engaging like an offline, interactivity. How do we, lot of innovation we have learned from that. And in terms of testing, how do we hyper personalize, how do we give feedback to students based on the tests using AI and machine learning algorithms to challenge the students and give a strong recommendation. So these are, in addition, the architecture, like, what you said, Puneet, one of the challenges in terms of Zoom going into the rural areas, the data. So how do you do a multiple bit rates so that any student in the rural areas also can watch? So for example, what we have seen is 80% of our current viewership comes from the mobile, and so those are some of the learnings which will enable us to build a platform technology to give the same experience as offline. And for us, the reason why we started is to democratize education, is to provide this kind of quality education at tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 and villages where they cannot afford. I used to come from Warangal, and towns like Warangal, Karimnagar don't get to have a good coaching institutions and they can't afford. How do we complement? And to your question, it has to be top faculty giving live, able to interact, ask a doubt anytime, have tests so that there's a strong recommendation at a very affordable price. So this COVID situation actually gave so much insights that we are able to build a platform which can be extremely affordable, as you said, which can complement students at the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 and villages. And in this current COVID situation, there may be a lot of parents who can afford also may not want to take risk of sending students to cities. More importantly, the reason we started with a passion to deliver education specifically to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, with this COVID experience, we have got so much insight that as we move on, the next 3 months is we'll be investing into the technology to ensure we give the same experience as offline and complement. This is the way we should democratize education, because in US, my kids go to school, we have not paid $1 till 12th class. And it's the same quality of education where India is lagging. I think this experience will, a lot of innovation will go into this space, and we'll be able to, give an affordable education across the country.
Interesting, Mr. Uday. Your perspective is you can enhance the real-time engagement and quality of learning with what you're learning from the insights you have from technology. Suraj, we will move on to you. You are looking at a whole different segment of audience as opposed to the rest of our panelists here. What are your learnings from the insights you have gained?
I think there are about 4 key takeaways that we've had over the last 2 or 3 months. The first one, and I say this in all honesty, is almost every single meeting that we had in person could have been another online conference or a Zoom meeting or a Hangouts meeting. That's something that we've realized. That's something that we realized also 3 years or 4 years ago when we started the company, because all of the conversations with our mentors have been from the comfort of our home. While I'm not claiming that we are teaching kids or we are actually delivering curriculum sort of services, all of the extracurricular services, all of the after school sort of services absolutely can be online. That's the first thing that we've learned. The second thing that we've learned is, if the last decade belonged to the word or to democratizing or to reaching out to as many students as possible, this upcoming decade, at least the next 5 years or maybe even more than that, is going to belong to this one word that I would say: personalized education. As long as you're able to not just get the average student who's in a classroom, but also the below average and the above average kid. Each kid learning at their own pace, as long as technology companies in the tech sector, colleges, etc., are able to personalize education to each student, we will all come out of this and the next decade smarter. The third thing is, we've sort of understood how students learn, especially in both in terms of high school as well as in terms of undergrads. Undergrads are looking or are starting to learn and think about possible careers, what kind of an internship or a project that I should be doing, what are people I can get in touch with, how do I network, and all of these things, given the particular situation that we find ourselves in. Because of the fact that not many undergraduate institutions are working right now, undergraduate seniors who are graduating are looking for online platforms to network, to get their first job out of college, or to just get out there, tap into their networks, etc., in terms of figuring out gainful employment. So these are a couple of things that we've learned over the last 2 and 3 months. But I think one of the biggest key takeaways for us internally has been that lectures or core content will probably still need to be physically delivered from a very capable teacher. But there are a lot of other sort of aspects, including the networking, including thinking about careers, including internships, projects, and most importantly, a lot of the meetings, which could be shifted online.
So very, very interesting takeaways from you, Suraj. The most important of them being personalized learning. Gone are the days of percentile. Gone are the days of peer-to-peer competition. It's all about competing with oneself. One of the key takeaways from there. Requesting all the panelists to take a look at the poll results. Once again, it is as open-ended as can be. And I think it's a reflection of the times we are in. And I will move on to Priya. Priya, you come from a very clear understanding of vitals from a health perspective of students, right? Something which was not that big a deal back in the day. Having a playground at school was an optional sort of a feature. But now your entire effort is in a spotlight. So what are your takeaways from the data you have been given access to through the schools and colleges you work with?
Yes, so I want to precede this by saying this is the year to survive. 2020 has been pretty much blacklisted and taken off from all of our books in that sense, so even from the schools. And this is the time to help instead of, the way we look at it is as a health company, it's our duty to help and not to earn. As you know, Puneet was also saying that it's very difficult right now to get anybody to pay for a lot of the technology based or physical offline based services. So we have sort of broken up based on learnings. Actually, we've sort of broken up entire our entire response into two categories. One is the scenario which is pre-school reopening, and one is post-school reopening scenario. So in the preschool reopening scenario, how we've been using technology for health, as we call it, the first thing that we've been doing is daily free live sessions for parents and kids. This is publicly available. You can go to HealthSet, go on our page, and every week we have 10 to 11,000 children logging into our daily live sessions. We have music on Mondays. We have tasty Tuesdays with a chef to bake healthy things at home with your parents. We have workout Wednesdays. We have experts coming on Thursdays. And this is seen an unprecedented kind of for us, and that's how we've been helping directly at home. And secondly, what we've been doing is that we've been asking our partners to identify children, and these children who are passionate about health, who are passionate about the mental health and their own physical health, we have an online, and these children can come in and publish their articles. There's a group on Facebook called HealthSet Go Kids, and I would like everyone to visit that. That has pictures and videos of kids doing healthy activities at home, doing yoga at home, meditation. So that's how we've been helping pre-COVID school reopening scenario, where we know that parents are at home, children are under lockdown, and we've also released a symptom checker so that any parent who is worried about their kids having any issues, there's an online symptom checker on our HealthSet Go page that we've been sort of rolling out to our parents so that they can easily check, and in case they have any concerns, they can consult a doctor online. Now, being a health company, this is the least that we can do now, and everything that we are doing right now is free of cost. Now, when schools do reopen, we have been working with international bodies such as WHO, UNICEF, which was mentioned earlier, as well as the World Economic Forum, to draft a checklist of the school reopening processes. We are also aware that CBSE will come out with it, etc. But we are currently schools, and we have put together very, very low cost sort of, we don't do sanitizers and we don't have sanitization as a core competency, but as a health organization, we've put together pan-India vendors at the lowest prices, which are very transparent, so that schools can access these vendors through us, and we can connect and get everything done. So that's been sort of our duty, and we know that technology is really helping us, because as soon as schools reopen, and like what has already been said, that temperatures need to be checked. So all our health records that are currently online for every child, we are adding a temperature section. So schools every day, like how if you order on Swiggy and Zomato, you can see the temperature of the person who is delivering the food, etc. Every day, if there are temperature checks in the school of every child, that is going to be there on a temperature dashboard that the principal or the director or the owner can see. I know right now it might sound excessive that this is a new reality that we are facing, but unfortunately, these are measures that have been going around globally, and it's something that we are implementing through technology as well. So I think amalgamation of all of this, that's what the schools will need for health-based, wellness-based response, and that's what we have been able to offer through technology. If technology was not there, I don't think that we've been able to engage with so many parents, give a temperature check dashboard, have the health records online. It wouldn't have been possible. So this is something that has really helped.
Thank you, Priya. Interesting insights there. Yours was pre-COVID a nice to have category. Today it's been propelled into mainstream, and it's very significant. So
it's important. Yes.
Sorry, Charo, you were saying something.
Yeah. So I just want to respond to a couple of comments made here. So one of the things that Puneet was mentioning is about data consumption. I think technology has proved time and again, whenever there is a problem associated with cost and delivery, there's innovation in this space, right? So the more data gets consumed, the more cost users incur. I'm sure there's already innovation going on. Adding to what Uday was saying, there's adaptive bit rates where we also ourselves in transcode our 3D really high fidelity content in 3 different bit rates, right? So there is adaptive streaming on the other end as well. The end user experience doesn't get spoiled, right? You adapt to what the bandwidth requirements are there. So I think that's something, a positive side to, technology is ever so innovating all the time, that I'm sure that problem will get resolved the more the load is put on the system. And I think, Suraj mentioned something like the content has to be delivered by the only star teacher or, and the other things around I have a different perspective. Teacher's role itself is getting redefined. And every single, incidents that we see, not just like COVID, there's been a lot of times where teacher's role is in flux right now, right? So gone are the days where I would say teacher's role was just about delivering content. Now teacher's role is also to be a facilitator, a guide, a mentor, and more and so I'm seeing it's becoming an innovator as well as an entertainer in a virtual classroom, how to keep the class together and engaged. So I think the teacher's role is also innovating. And I think you talked about capable teacher. Now, how are you going to have so many of capable teachers, right? Who is thinking about teacher capacity also? This sounds, something scalable. And I think that's where upskilling our own teachers as well comes into the picture. And this is just a practically perspective that, this is some of the areas we're already working in, but we are also helping teachers upskill themselves and get to that star level, so that the teacher capacity is also something we keep in perspective.
Thanks, Charu. While we wait for Sri Lakshmi to get on board and answer this question with her perspectives, I'm putting up what I call the deadly poll. This is the poll number 2, and this is the icing on the cake poll. So it'll be interesting to see these results. Go ahead, Sri Lakshmi. What is your perspective on this?
I think the takeaways and the observations have been made, over the past couple of weeks, as we've all been experiencing this, is that the change has been forced onto the system. So which is a really good thing. The new set of guidelines towards health will be coming in. A new set of approach towards teaching in the classroom will be coming in. And having experienced it has given a great opportunity for organizations, for parents, and for teachers to understand the importance of all these new experiences, right? And what is really interesting is that it's a COVID situation, right? And post-COVID, at some point, I think we are going to, get away from that. It can take a month, it can take a year, but at some point we're going to come out of it. And when we really come out of it, what's going to happen then? Are we going to maintain the same amount of, do we still continue to check, the temperatures every single day? Or, to what level of health guidelines do we follow? And how in India it's always challenging, especially across educational institutions, for guidelines to be followed. There's always, a chance for someone not to follow that. And how there was reluctance towards technology and not believing in it. And now it has given that taste, it has given that experience. Now, they want to go back to using technology. And another most important takeaway, at least being a project-based school at Keystone, is that we could see the participation from parents has increased tremendously. Earlier, if we had to really make parents part of the learning process for children, it was a huge task. And now it just happened within a day or two. Earlier, which used to take months, for parents to believe in that. So there are so many situations which have forced teachers, parents, institutions to believe in and to follow. And I think sometimes some things happen for good. But of course, we have to look at how much of this learning are we going to continue post-COVID situation. And I think it has to come from everywhere. Organizations like, what Priya and, Charu have been talking about, that when you provide such guidelines, when you bring such awareness, and when you continue to talk about post-COVID situation also, because, human mind is always temporary. I do it as long as I'm scared. I do it as long as I fear that something is going to be, something is going to happen. And when everything is normal, okay, everything is normal. We don't have to sanitize our hands. Everything is normal. We don't have to check, the temperature at a minor level. So I think what is important is keep going back to our learning experiences, reminding institutions, organizations, parents, children, everyone about what we learned from this. What is the huge takeaway from this? Yes, we believe in online learning. There is a huge advantage with blended learning. Of course, there are hundreds of solutions. It's up to the institutions on you pick and choose what's best for your children. Right? And again, at the same time, not giving away, okay, now I don't have to care about health and hygiene because there's no COVID around, right? So that's a no-no. So understanding these things and putting together our experiences and continuing with our, experiences is what I believe we should continue to, focus on. Yeah.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. And I'm just putting up the results of the last question. I hope everyone can see it. It's very reassuring that all your musings, everything you're dwelling about is not going to go to waste. At least.
Gautam, I wanted to add one thing to Sri Lakshmi, what she said. I think she put it very beautifully that when we are scared, that's the only time we do something. Especially, like you said, post-COVID, if there is no, if there's no COVID, then we'll forget about hygiene and we'll forget about hand washing and we won't do all of this. I think very well put, because I think in our country, it's not only COVID, we also have in every family almost cases of diabetes, we have cancer, we have heart disease, we have a lot of deaths due to many other causes which are very, very serious. But it's just how much importance India finally can place on health, and how much importance that as institutions we can finally place on health, that now it's time for us to not take it lightly. It's time for us to make it a permanent part of our life. So that is something that needs to happen.
Thanks, Priya. Thank you so much. The results from the poll are quite reassuring. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and looks like most of the kids will be going back to school. So you'll all be very busy this year. Good to hear that. Another question I have to end this segment before we move on to some of the questions from the audience. So this is to Charu and Puneet, but it's open to anybody of anyone from the panel to sort of comment on. Do you think the pandemic will further widen this digital divide in the country, or is this an opportunity to cover the last mile? And by this I mean tech-enabled institutions will speed ahead, while those that are not will sort of get left behind. So if you believe that it is a yes, then how are your organizations collaborating with the other side? In case of Puneet, with service providers, in case of Charu, with institutions, to sort of make this a reality. So so start with Charu.
So I think digital divide is not something that we've just started talking about or we're thinking about. I think digital divide, we've been talking about for a long time now in India, how to bridge that. Right, and internet started in 94, 95, right? Even today, only 16% of women in India have access to internet. So that just shows to how what a long journey we have to ahead of us. We have ahead of us that to bridge this gap, right? So digital divide is not something that we've just been talking about because of this. Obviously, now it is obviously just the situation has presented itself. And it gives us an opportunity to leapfrog, right? Our initiatives that are kind of put for that bridging of the digital divide, and how we can roll up our engines to get there very quickly, so that specifically in the education space, how we can bring education to every home. And I think where we could start from is India Inc. itself. Government employees, about 20 million government employees. So even if we start an initiative from that perspective and powering up all the government initiatives, including government schools, and getting the digital India spun up from there, that would be a great springboard for the remaining part of India to get onto this, and we can help. The Ambanis and Tatas of the world, I'm sure, will come in to bridge the remaining gap. So I think that will also, push for us to see the shift in consumption patterns. I think how the devices are being used, how technology being used in agri-tech, health tech, food tech. I think EdTech is not just the only sector where we've seen how the innovation has happened when that last mile delivery to the rural areas and tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities also starts happening. I think there is a great superpower, I feel, within India on the other side of this digital divide, right? And I think we at Practically are also ready for that boom. In fact, that explosion, once it happens, we are future ready to make sure we can deliver at that scale, and that, have the technology and robustness built into the scale, right, from the get-go. So I think, and one of the other ways we at Practically think about it, it's not just the teacher, right? Learning is 360. How we can actually engage the student even while being at home using augmented reality or a lot of simulations and everything. Most of this works on a regular smartphone. That's the beauty of it. And, hardware devices are going down. This happened with phones. It's happening with VR headsets. It's happening with a lot of other devices. The more content you create, there's a healthy balance between the hardware and the software industry, right? The more software, the more apps get created, hardware prices shoot down. So that's what's going to happen with more and more, I would say, devices also. So there is definitely an opportunity here that we can just push the edtech, not just and take all the institutions, government, everything, everybody along with us, not just the technology companies will push for it.
Thank you, Charu. Puneet.
Gautam, I'll try to answer this very quickly, but what you're asking is in fact a very, very important question. I mean, we all in this panel, in this conference, in this country have to think about this. And from my personal assessment, I can tell you there's a chance that this can go both ways. Okay, if we're able to get to the ground, and if evidence of the last 15, 20 days or a couple of months is anything to go by, then the divide is going to increase. Okay, this is not how we should be doing. This government has done nothing. No state governments have done, or at least they've not done much on engagement in government schools. They've all simply said, in fact, I've been engaging with some ministers, and they have simply said, and I'm not talking about Telangana minister, by the way. I'm just saying that some ministers have said, what can we do? It's that there's no connectivity. Our teachers are saying the teachers are at home, or there's no way to clear. Then how did Narayana Group do it? Narayana Group is conducting 5,000 live classes a day. How can we have done it, and the government should be. In fact, government should be better than us. So if we don't solve the last mile that we're talking about, we're only going to see the rich or the accessible have more access to education, and the others get totally left behind. It's a responsibility that some private, I even offered that, allow me to help you. I even offered some state governments, allow me to help you to do something about it. I have teachers free, and I can give you those classes if you want. But again, the government has to come forward, and we as private institutions support whatever we can in doing it.
Yeah, in Tatas and Ambanis, I forgot to mention Narayanas.
Thanks, Puneet, once again for your very honest, stirs thought. Sri Lakshmi, you want to share something?
So, just want to share an anecdote. I was on a conversation with one of the government school principal this morning, and this is from Telangana, Puneet. So, I asked him, what is happening? Are you taking online classes? Are you in touch with your children? And what is happening to your teachers? Where are they? Where are the kids? And trust me, his answer is, I don't know anything. I have no clue. Government hasn't told me anything. And okay, when government says something, I'll do it. Okay, then are your kids, do you know anything about online learning? Do you know, are your kids, equipped to do it? Do they have mobiles with the connection? I don't know all that. I just want government to do something about this. Whenever they say something, we will do it. And again, we need a lot of time, to do all of this. So, I could see that fear, uncertainty, not having clarity, I think somewhere at the root level, if you go deeper into what a parent is thinking, what a teacher is thinking, what a school leader is thinking, there is so much more to all of this than just, about yes or no, or, whether online is, happening or not happening. So, yeah.
Thanks, Sri Lakshmi. Thank you so much. There is a very interesting question, I think, which is very relevant to the conversation today from Takshil in the audience. So I can sort of reframe that question. The question is, what percentage of teachers today are familiar with technology? And can we take the example of the banking industry, for example? I think a decade ago, it was imperative that everybody understand technology, and the consumer also was forced to understand technology, not just the institution. And so how do we go about this? So it's applicable to most of the people on the panel. So Charu, yes, we can start.
Yeah, I don't think it was a decade ago with what happened with banking institutions. I think what is more relevant to quote here is what happened in demonetization, right? That's where fintech really took off, and which was a couple of years ago. That I think that's what COVID is doing to edtech companies and teachers and a lot of institutions. That what demonetization did to fintech companies, right? So I think it is not. Everybody will get to know, right? It's just a matter of time. I think all teachers will have access to online resources, a lot of learning materials, a lot of students and parents will be on the lookout of it. So I think it is just a matter of time, and give it a couple of months. Every teacher in this, every teacher, serious teacher in this, and a serious parent in this country would know about it, right? So it's just a matter of time. I think that's just my 2 cents on that.
Also from the teaching fraternity, there's a lot of diverse talent coming through, young talent, which is well equipped to handle technology and engage their students with technology. So I think that is a plus. And like you're saying, everybody will sort of fall in line. There's no other option. Another very interesting perspective from the audience, from Mr. Vishwa, is cross-platform partnership the way forward, like a tie-up with broadband service providers like ACT to stream content free of cost? Because everybody is talking about education being democratic and reaching the last man, right? So I think it's a very relevant question, and I think Mr. Uday's perspective on this will be very interesting.
Yeah, I think we have already been talking to ACT. I think we've already partnered right now with ACT, and we've been educating other broadband providers, including BSNL. As part of the broadband offering, we are positioning this to include as part of the broadband subscription. That way, once our costs are covered, then we can really democratize across the country. And they're quite open to it. I think they want to look at this few more months, how the technology will evolve and how the usage is going to be with the students at home. You will see a lot of broadband providers who will be stepping up to bundle education, and that way, once our costs are covered, technology enablers, the cost can go down significantly, and I think it could be affordable. And to answer Puneet's last questions, see, the bandwidth at the rural areas today, if you go take any Gram Panchayat level, the internet, 4G is available in most of the village, and BSNL is doing the air fiber at the 250,000 Gram Panchayat. So the internet, the barriers of the technology from an internet perspective no longer would be there. And as Charu mentioned, we do 7 bit rates, in terms of ensuring that the student can watch without any buffering. Both from a broadband perspective, from a technology perspective, the broadband providers are quite open to take this, and I think this will help really democratize education.
Thank you, Mr. Uday. Anybody else has a perspective on this? I will move on to another question from the audience. So this is again coming from a whole different angle. Do you think that teachers and students will ever share a rapport like they used to back in the day? So this third perspective coming in, third dimension coming in. What is your take on this? I mean, you all sort of studied in an environment largely driven by students. So I think your take as academicians and as business owners will both be very interesting. Who would like to?
I think I can go first. I mean, I certainly hope so. I mean, we all have grown up looking up to some of our, teachers and, the interaction with them. I certainly hope so. There will be a relationship. And I don't think specifically that relationship will get affected. I'll give you a simple example why. When we did a survey with our students, whether you want to listen to a class and Udaygar, you can listen to this survey, and they probably for your business model a little bit. We asked the students in our classroom, do you want to listen to your teacher or you want to listen to the top teacher? Okay, 75% said I want to listen to my teacher because I have a connection with that teacher. I go to the school, I'll see that teacher, I know the face, she tells me you are a bad student, you are a good student. That personal connection, you did this wrong, you didn't. They have a personal connection with that. And unfortunately, when students develop that personal connection with teachers, we had to actually send green boards and white boards to teachers' houses. Listen, teachers' houses, give them internet connection in their houses, their phone internet connection at least, and then make that teacher teach the live class. So today we've delivered 4,000 boards in living rooms of teachers' houses today, and they're teaching classes from their house. So that's the level of engagement the student requires. So I don't think that bond will be affected. I think that bond is there for here to stay, and I don't think that COVID will affect that bond. Hopefully not.
I think I completely agree with Puneet there. In fact, we didn't have a virtual classroom offering pre-COVID, and he knows this very well. And we never even thought it as as something that we want to enter into. But because of that very thing, we were now pushed to wrap around all our content and other services we do within a virtual space, because our earlier business model was that it was B2B2C, that we go to schools and our product would be used within the classrooms. We help the teacher shows us, and that again, that value proposition percolates down to the student and the parent then, right? But now what do you do when there are no physical classrooms? So I think we were also innovative on the side when the student institutes were being nimble and agile to evolve this new era of a business model that came out from this. I think that's not going to go away. Every student wants to look at the teacher face, wants to understand what we can help to do the teacher and student engagement and that experience become much more seamless and meaningful. I think that's where the magic lies, but it's just definitely not going away.
Thanks, Charu. A final question for everybody here. Somebody wants to contribute. Sri Lakshmi, hi. Yeah, please go ahead.
Look at the core process of how children and teachers build relationships, right? So currently, as Puneet has mentioned, where the students are asking about, their teachers and the teachers that they have been interacting with. So we're talking about a situation where this is, they already have built a relationship. And we are just trying to reconnect that relationship. We are not creating any new relationships here. If we have to really look at, okay, is a new teacher coming in and then this whole online platform is up and we are doing completely online sessions. And I think that's where, how do we really build relationships with children when it is only online? And it's not the teacher that you have already interacted with. So I strongly believe, when we have done some of these sessions, even at our school, when we need some experts, to come and share their knowledge with our children, and they're not from Hyderabad. We used to do these online sessions, with experts from other states or, other places. And I see that it's about the person, right? When you know how to really connect with the children and when you know how to talk to that person, and children do connect very easily. You just need to know the pulse of a child. And second most important thing is, while all this is being expected from an adult on how to connect with children, their social emotional needs are being addressed somewhere, right? Then that means that responsibility is now hugely lying on the parent. Because any social emotional connection and their needs for their well-being, social well-being should be addressed by someone. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. We've spoken a lot today. This is to all the panelists about how education is going to evolve. There's one final question that's sort of left unanswered, and I think maybe a little debate around that with some closing comments from all of you will make this a wholesome session. How do you see, within this chaos, how do you see students competing? So there's still a very competitive environment out there. There are exams and tests that determine how successful a child is. How do you see them competing, or how you see this landscape changing? This would make the conversation really wholesome. I'll start with Mr. Uday and then move one-on-one to all of the panelists here. Mr. Uday, your take on this?
I think, students from a competitive aspect, I don't think anything would change because they're still having, as Puneet said, they're having classes, they have exams, hyper-personalized recommendations for the students. So I think that competitive nature is not going to change, will still be the same. I think it's just that the exams have been moved out. There's a lot more time for other students to cope up, but from a competitive environment, I don't think there would be much of a change.
It was very brutal. The way the education industry was moving, it was quite a lot of pressure on everybody to prove themselves in ways which are not natural to them. So a lot of mental stress, coped with identity crisis, etc. So I think let's take a health perspective on this from Priya.
Yes, there is so much stress going on right now. I cannot emphasize. We have seen the rates of depression, suicide across the world between the ages of 10 to 16 is up, unprecedented level. People are at home. There's a lot of verbal domestic abuse. I mean, there's a lot that's going on at home right now, and I would really request all the schools who are watching and all the organizations here. We should try not to perpetrate competition at this time. I think this is a time where we need to support people mentally and physically from a health perspective. The reason that is that if you're stressed out, you are anyway not going to be able to perform at your highest potential. And if we really need to bring out the potential in children, it's very important for us to support them in every way, and hopefully the competition itself will turn more into solidarity than competition. That is my hope for all, for whatever is happening right now online. Everyone knows that it's a trying time, it's a testing time. So this is not the best time to be competitive or promote competition. Of course, children already have that in them, they'll want to do it. But if the teachers and educators can play a role in reducing in some way or the other, we'll be doing a great to these children.
Thanks, Priya. Puneet, I'll move on to you. It's I will return your favor from the rest of the panel as well. It's a controversial subject for you, and there's been a lot of media attention to the group when it comes to the pressure on students, etc. So, your take on this? How does this scenario change?
See, honestly, Gautam, look, obviously we face this question a lot again, and it's a part of society. I think pressure is a part of society. When you leave school, also you're facing pressure in your college. When you leave college, you go to workplace, you're facing pressure. You start your own business, you're facing pressure from investors, from your customers, from your competitors. There is pressure from everywhere. And I'm not saying that, look, it's a good thing. Priya is right. We have invested a lot in mental health, mental wellness. We are running our own yoga classes, counseling hours, 2 hours. Anybody can log in and start counseling. We have a 40-member counselor right now who are on our rolls, who are doing it. It's so health and wellness will take a priority in institutions. But you want me to be honest with you and tell you that, you want me to be dishonest and tell you that competition will go away? It will not go away. People will find a way to compete because we have this many number of seats or this many good positions of jobs in this many institutions across, and we have this many. There's no way. They have to find a way in any situation to compete and win. So we have to balance it out, yes, but competition is unfortunately here to stay.
So, so I think, as Puneet said, institutions can only do so much to ease out stress and a lot of other things. But competition also comes from the society itself, right? From the parents to begin with, from the homes, the houses. So I'm sure there's everybody again has a part to play. But I think the competitiveness and a lot of stress not just comes from that you have to get into so many seats and so many, but from the underlying nature of that stress that that the parents are still living aspirations of their own through their kids. So I think from a socio-cultural standpoint, that shift has to be made, that it's okay to take, I hope my mom is not listening to, but she told me that, you won't be a human being if you didn't take sciences. Obviously she didn't rephrase it like that, but that I had only a couple of choices. So I think from that perspective, it has to shift from it's okay to, be a singer or be an artist or be do whatever. So, so India here and the US and other European world here, I think there's a happy medium somewhere where competition will balance out your dreams and aspirations and truly to who you want to be, right?
Thanks, Charu. Very interesting perspective. I'll move to Suraj. Suraj, you're looking at some international competition, people competing from across the world. What is your take on this? How is this going to change?
Sure. So one of the things that Indians have been always really good at, right, is beating them out on price. This is something that we've done since the IT revolution, since the offshoring of all of the stuff. And we are positioning ourselves to be at the forefront where we're going to be delivering better quality service than anyone out there at 1/4 the price. And therefore, competition from ultra-rich countries like the US or the rest of Europe is not going to be that is going to be harming us specifically. It depends on us in terms of how well we are going to be positioning ourselves to capture as much of the market as possible.
Thanks, Suraj. From those really sharp, opinionated perspectives from Charu and Puneet, I shall move to the order of the day, a very balanced perspective of Sri Lakshmi. What is your take on competition? Somehow you seem to have a very motherly effect on this panel.
So again, I think for us, at least at our organization, competition has got a new meaning, and that's how we've been teaching our children. I think we are definitely moving away and understanding competitive exams are different from the word competition itself, right? There are all kinds of competitive assessments, and where we compare, one performance to the other performance. But making a child grow with that in mind, that tomorrow, after 12 years, I'm going to compete with someone, is not something that we strongly believe in. Competition is more about working towards yourself, giving your best performance and doing your best. And that's the thought process, we believe in at our organization. And again, I don't know, it still doesn't make sense to me using the word competition. I think I have been through it, and all of us in this, panel have always been through it. But we all are still figured out our own ways, to be ourselves and to compete with ourselves. And we all agree with that. So I think, when we talk about competition around this COVID period, my message to all the parents who are, listening to this, that again, everything translates from a parent and from the peer and from people around, right? By self, in general, it's not in human nature to just say, I want to be competitive, right? Yes, you can be competitive with yourself, just always comparing yourself with the others. They cannot panic around this period, and they cannot stress their children, around this period. What they think and how they behave is what translates to their children. Doesn't matter whether you have a 12th grader or a kindergarten child, right? So looking at competition in a more, from a more positive side, and telling our kids that, you have to improve yourself, you have to work with yourself. Doesn't matter whether you're going to, start a company or going to give your 12th grade exam, is what I believe.
Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. It's been a great session. Really appreciate the efforts of the panel and a great audience turnout, and a survey form will come through, and we'll appreciate feedback on the session. Thank you so much to all the panelists for spending time this afternoon. It was wonderful moderating this with you, and it was a lot of insights, I think even cross insights for you to work with going forward. So appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Bye.